The words cut through me sharper than any knife ever could. She's just my grandma. Don't let her sign. I froze, my pen still hovering above the document at the bank counter. For a second, I thought I had misheard. Maybe my ears were betraying me because of old age. But no. The words had come from my daughter's lips. My daughter. The child I had carried in my womb. The one I had raised with my bare hands. The one whose tears I had wiped and whose laughter had filled my home. And now, in front of strangers in a place as public as this, she had looked straight at the banker and told him I was not her mother. A silence spread in the room. The young banker looked at me, then at her. Other customers shifted uneasily in their seats, pretending not to stare but failing. My hand trembled, and the pen rolled away, clattering on the floor. My eyes searched hers for any sign of regret. A flicker that this was all a mistake, that she had said it without meaning it. But her face was calm, serious, almost cold. She's just my grandma, she repeated, this time slower, as if she wanted to make sure the banker understood. She doesn't know what she's doing. Don't let her sign anything. I felt the ground shift beneath me. The room spun. The bank walls seemed to close in on me, and my heart thudded against my chest. My breath caught in my throat. Tears pricked at my eyes, but I couldn't let them fall here. Not in front of everyone. Not while my own daughter was undoing my existence with her words. The banker cleared his throat awkwardly. Ma'am. Perhaps you should sit down for a moment. But I didn't sit. I couldn't. I stood there, frozen between past and present, between who I thought my daughter was and who she had just revealed herself to be. And just as I opened my mouth to speak, to remind her of who I was, of who she was, of the bond that tied us together, something happened. Something that made every head in that bank turn at once. Years earlier, long before the bank, before the betrayal, our home was filled with laughter. Back then I was simply a mother, proud and grateful, raising a daughter who was my sunshine. Her name was Emily. Emily had been a gentle child, with big curious eyes and a voice that carried music in it. She loved to hold my hand everywhere we went, whether it was the market or church. People often stopped me to compliment her. What a bright little girl, they would say, and my heart would swell with joy. I believed she would grow up to be everything I had ever dreamed. Life was never easy. I had worked long hours selling fabrics in the market, saving every coin I could. Emily's father had left us when she was barely 3, disappearing into the city and never looking back. But I never allowed her to feel the absence of love. I dubbelt minne. When she fell sick, I stayed up through the night. When she wanted to study, I sacrificed food sometimes just to buy her books. And when she cried, I always found a way to make her smile again. Emily grew, and with her growth came changes. First, they were small. She no longer wanted to hold my hand in public. Then she began spending more time with friends than at home. She rolled her eyes when I reminded her of house chores. Still, I told myself it was normal teenage behavior, nothing to worry about. But then came the bigger changes. She started questioning my decisions. She grew ashamed of the old, patched clothes I sometimes wore to the market. Once, in front of her friends, she had laughed at me for mispronouncing a word in English. My heart ached, but I brushed it aside. She was young. She would outgrow it. I kept telling myself that. Yet the cracks widened. I remember one Sunday afternoon. She had just returned from a friend's house, and I asked her to help me in the kitchen. She sighed and muttered under her breath, "Why can't you just do it yourself?" That evening, as I washed the dishes alone, I tried to swallow the lump in my throat. I reminded myself of the little girl who used to run into my arms after school. The child who would say, "Mummy, you're the best." I held on to those memories like a drowning person clutches driftwood. The highs and lows of our life continued. There were days Emily was kind, thoughtful, and loving. On her 16th birthday, she hugged me tightly and whispered, "Thank you for everything, Mom." That day, I cried happy tears, believing perhaps the storm had passed. But storms do not pass easily. Sometimes they only pause, gathering strength. The first time I sensed real danger was when Emily began speaking of a man, an older man she had met through friends. His name was Richard. He was wealthy, smooth-talking, and far too eager to impress her. I didn't like him, but Emily adored him. She said he understood her dreams, that he promised to make her life easier. I warned her. I begged her. Be careful, Emily. Some people only come close because they want to use you. She brushed me off. You're just jealous, Mum. You don't understand him. It hurt, but I stayed silent. Sometimes silence is all a mother can afford when words fall on deaf ears. Life continued, as it always does. We shared meals, quarrels, and moments of laughter. Yet deep inside, a seed of fear had begun to grow in me. Fear that one day, she would choose someone else over me. Fear that the love I had poured into her would not be enough to keep us tied together. And then years later, my fear turned into reality, on that fateful day at the bank. But before I returned to the bank, let me tell you what led us there. Because betrayal does not happen in a single moment. It is planted, watered, and then it blooms when least expected. It all began with the land. In our family, there was a small piece of land my late parents had left me. I had kept it safe all these years untouched, because I always thought it would one day be Emily's inheritance. That land was my pride, my backup plan, the one thing I knew could save her if life ever treated her unfairly. When Richard discovered the land, his interest in Emily seemed to grow even more. He encouraged her to convince me to sell it, to invest the money in his business plans. I refused. I told Emily the land was her future security, not something to throw away on promises. She grew angry, saying I didn't trust her judgment, that I wanted to control her life. Our arguments grew hotter. Nights became longer. Sometimes we wouldn't speak for days. The warmth between us turned into something cold and sharp. Yet even with all the pain, I never expected what she did at the bank. And that brings us back to the moment I stood frozen, the banker staring at me, my daughter's words echoing in my ears. She's just my grandma. Don't let her sign. I opened my mouth, ready to defend myself, to declare the truth of who I was. But just then, a hand touched my shoulder roughly. I turned, and what I saw made the entire bank gasp. The hand on my shoulder was firm, almost rough, pulling me slightly backward. My heart raced as I turned to see who it was. Standing behind me was Richard. The very man I had feared would come between me and my daughter. His suit was sharp, his smile thin, but his eyes burned with something I could not quite name. "Excuse me," he said to the banker with a polite nod, though his grip on me tightened. "There's been some confusion here. She's elderly and doesn't always know what she's signing. My wife," he gestured proudly at Emily, "was just trying to protect her." His wife. The words hit me like a whip. Emily had not only chosen him, she had already tied her future to him without ever telling me. My knees weakened, but I steadied myself on the counter. "I'm her mother," I said, my voice trembling but firm. "Not her grandmother. Her mother. That land belongs to me, and I know what I'm doing." Richard chuckled softly, shaking his head as if humoring a stubborn child. "You see? She gets confused. Sometimes she believes she's younger than she is. Please, sir," he said to the banker, "don't let her sign anything today. It wouldn't be right." The banker's eyes darted nervously between us. Other customers had stopped pretending. They stared openly now, whispering behind their hands. Shame burned hot in my chest. Emily avoided my gaze. She clutched Richard's arm tightly, her face set like stone. For a long moment, the room was silent, the tension thick enough to choke. Then the banker cleared his throat. "Perhaps we should step aside and resolve this matter privately." "No," I said sharply, louder than I intended. "No more whispers. Let everyone hear. Let everyone see. This girl is my daughter, my only child. And today she has called me a liar, a fool, and now, her grandmother." My voice cracked, but I refused to let the tears fall. I would not give them that satisfaction. The banker shifted uncomfortably, unsure of what to do. Finally, he excused himself and left to fetch his manager. That left the three of us standing there, the air heavy with unspoken words. Richard leaned closer, his voice low enough for only me and Emily to hear. "You've had your time, old woman. Let her live her life now. Stop clinging to things you can't keep." My lips parted, but before I could answer, Emily finally spoke. Her voice was quiet but sharp, like glass breaking in the night. "Mum, please don't make this harder than it already is." Mum. The word should have comforted me. But in that moment it felt like a cruel reminder of what I was losing. And then something happened that changed everything. As the banker returned with the manager, Richard snatched the documents off the counter. The sudden movement startled everyone. Gasps filled the room. "What are you doing?" the manager demanded. Richard smiled smoothly. "Just making sure she doesn't hurt herself." But the look in his eyes told me otherwise. He was desperate enough to do anything. And that was when I realized, this battle was no longer just about land. It was about something much darker. Long before this day at the bank, there had been signs. Signs I ignored. Signs I convinced myself were nothing. One evening months before, I had overheard Richard speaking on the phone outside the house. His voice was low, urgent, but I caught enough to know he was in debt. Deep debt. He spoke of men who were waiting, of money he needed fast. When he noticed me watching, he smiled too quickly, waved me off, and said it was just business talk. I wanted to believe him. For Emily's sake, I stayed silent. But silence has a cost. The next morning, Emily had come to me with her soft, pleading eyes. "Mum, Richard says if we just invest a little, we can triple our money. You should sell the land. It's wasted just sitting there." I shook my head. "That land is your shield, Emily. One day, if everything else fails, you'll still have it." She grew angry. "Why do you never trust me? Why do you always think I don't know anything?" That night, she did not come home. She stayed with Richard. And when she finally returned the next day, she barely looked at me. It was then I began to fear the worst, that she loved him more than she trusted me. Back in the bank, as Richard held the papers, the manager ordered him to return them. He hesitated, then placed them back on the counter with a forced smile. Of course, I was only protecting my family, but I knew better. I bent slowly to pick up the pen I had dropped earlier. My hand trembled, but not from weakness. From rage, from sorrow, from the weight of years of sacrifice that seemed to be crumbling before me. "Emily," I said, turning to face her fully. "Look at me." She didn't. Her eyes stayed fixed on the floor. "Look at me." My voice cracked through the room like a whip. Startled, she raised her gaze, and for a brief moment I saw it. The little girl who used to run into my arms. The child who once thought I was her whole world. But the moment was gone as quickly as it came. Her face hardened again. And then she whispered something that made my knees weaken all over again. "Mum, I don't think you understand. The land isn't yours anymore." The bank fell into dead silence. "What did you say?" I asked, my throat dry. She swallowed hard. "I already signed it over. Last week." The air in the bank turned heavy after Emily's words. "I already signed it over. Last week." For a moment, I thought I had gone deaf. My ears buzzed, my chest tightened, and my legs trembled. Surely I had misheard. Surely, my daughter could not have said what I thought she said. You what?" I whispered, my voice breaking. Emily's lips quivered, but she forced herself to stand tall. Richard's hand rested proudly on her shoulder, steadying her as though she had just done something noble. "I signed the land over," she repeated, her voice louder this time as if rehearsed. "It's not yours anymore. It belongs to Richard's company. I didn't want to hurt you by telling you earlier." My heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. That land, the one thing I had saved, guarded, protected for decades, it was gone. Not stolen by strangers, but handed away by the very child I had raised, the one I had sacrificed everything for. Gasps rippled through the bank. The banker stepped back, eyes wide. The manager exchanged a glance with him, as though wondering if they should call security. But no one moved. They were too stunned. "Emily." My voice cracked like dry wood. How could you go behind my back? That land was meant to secure your future." Her eyes filled with tears, but she quickly blinked them away. "I am securing my future, Mum. Richard promised me. He promised us this would change our lives. We won't have to struggle anymore. We'll be rich, we'll be free." Free. My voice rose, raw with pain. Free from what? From me? From the mother who gave you life, who worked her hands to the bone so you could eat, so you could study, so you could dream? Emily, that land was not just soil and trees. It was my blood, my sweat, my legacy. Richard cut in smoothly. his voice dripping with false calm. Enough of this drama. You're embarrassing yourself, old woman. She made her choice, and you should respect it. Old woman. The words stabbed deeper than a knife. I turned to Emily, hoping, begging for her to defend me, to correct him. But she said nothing. She stood there silently, letting his words hang in the air like a sentence. That was the moment I felt something break inside me. Not just sorrow, but a deep, unbearable crack that reached into the very core of my being. I staggered back a step, clutching my chest. My breath came shallow, my vision blurred. The room swirled. Someone shouted for water. Hands reached out to steady me, but I shook them off. No, I whispered, forcing myself upright. Don't touch me. I looked at Emily again, my voice trembling. Tell me why you did this. Did I fail you so much that you could betray me like this? Did I not love you enough? Her lips trembled, and for a fleeting second, I thought I saw regret. But then Richard squeezed her shoulder, and her face hardened again. You wouldn't understand, she said softly. You never do. Those words pierced me deeper than the betrayal itself. But how had it come to this? How had my sweet Emily, my sunshine, become the girl who now denied me? It all started months before, when Richard began to whisper into her ears. He painted grand pictures of wealth, of travel, of fine clothes and fancy houses. He told her she was too beautiful, too smart to remain stuck in a poor woman's shadow. He told her she deserved more than the small life I had given her. And Emily believed him. One evening, I had walked into the sitting room to hear him telling her, "Your mother doesn't know the value of that land. She'll cling to it until it's useless. But you're smarter than her. You see the future." Emily had blushed at his praise, her eyes shining with the dangerous light of flattery. I wanted to pull her away, to shake sense into her, but I bit my tongue. I thought love would open her eyes. I thought my sacrifices would speak louder than his lies. I was wrong. He convinced her to forge my signature. He took her to a lawyer who cared more for bribes than truth. Piece by piece, he stole not just the land, but the bond between me and my daughter. And I let it happen, because I was too blind, too trusting, too hopeful. Back in the bank, the walls seemed to close in on me. Customers whispered louder now, their faces filled with pity, curiosity, or judgment. Poor woman. Her own daughter? Imagine the shame. Shame. Yes, that was the word. Shame that I had raised a child who could betray me so deeply. Shame that I had allowed Richard into our lives. Shame that I was standing here, helpless, while the very ground beneath me had been taken. The banker finally spoke. "Ma'am, perhaps you should file a legal complaint if this transfer was done without your consent." I almost laughed. Legal complaint? Against my own daughter? Against the flesh of my flesh? How could I drag her into court, even now after all this? But before I could answer, Richard smirked and said, "Everything was legal. She signed willingly. There's nothing to complain about." And the worst part was, he was right. I stumbled out of the bank that day, tears blurring my vision, my body shaking. Emily did not follow me. She stayed with Richard. Outside, the sun burned hot, but I felt cold. Colder than I had ever felt in my life. The streets moved around me like a blur. Cars honking, people shouting, children laughing. The world kept turning, but mine had stopped. As I walked home, every step heavy, memories assaulted me. Emily's first steps. Emily's laughter. Emily's graduation. Emily hugging me on her 16th birthday and saying, "Thank you for everything, Mum." Where had that girl gone? Had I lost her forever? By the time I reached home, my legs gave out, and I collapsed into the old wooden chair by the door. For the first time in many years, I wept without holding back. My sobs filled the empty house, echoing off the walls that once held our laughter. That night, I could not sleep. I tossed and turned, my mind replaying the day's events over and over. Anger and sorrow battled inside me. I thought of marching back to the bank, of fighting, of screaming. But then I thought of Emily's face, so cold, so distant, and I broke all over again. Toward midnight, a knock came at my door. Weakly, I rose to open it, half hoping, half dreading it might be Emily. It was not Emily. It was a man I had never seen before, tall, broad-shouldered. his face partly hidden under a cap. His voice was low, threatening. "You're Mrs. Harper?" he asked. "Yes," I said cautiously. He leaned closer. "Tell your daughter and her husband they have 1 week to pay up. 1 week. Or else." And then he walked away, leaving me trembling in the doorway. The night air clung to me long after the stranger disappeared into the darkness. His words rang in my ears. 1 week or else. I stood frozen at the door, my hand trembling on the frame, my knees weak. My heart thudded in my chest, heavy and uneven. Who was he? Why was he here? And why did he say pay up? It didn't take long for the truth to sink in. Richard. This had to be about Richard. The whispers I had overheard, the phone calls in hushed tones, the way he always avoided details when talking about his business. I had known deep down that something was wrong, but now the proof had come knocking at my door, literally. I closed the door slowly and leaned against it, sliding to the floor. Tears spilled down my cheeks, but this time they weren't just for me. They were for Emily, my daughter, my sunshine who had tied her life to a man with shadows clinging to him. I whispered into the darkness, "Oh God, protect her. Please protect her." Sleep did not come that night. I sat by the window staring into the emptiness outside, listening for every sound, every footstep. Each creak of the floorboards, each bark of a dog in the distance made me flinch. By morning my body was exhausted, but my mind was on fire. I knew I had to confront Emily. I had to tell her what had happened, warn her about the danger she was walking into. Maybe, just maybe, she would finally listen. That afternoon I went to her house. It was a new apartment Richard had rented for them. A modern place with shiny tiles, fancy furniture, and cold walls that did not feel like home. When Emily opened the door, she looked surprised to see me. "Mom? What are you doing here?" Her tone was cautious, not warm. Already my heart ached. "I need to talk to you," I said firmly. "It's important." She hesitated, then stepped aside. "All right. Come in." Richard was not home, thank God. The silence between us was thick as I sat on the couch, clutching my bag tightly. Emily sat opposite me, her arms crossed. "What is it?" she asked. I took a deep breath. "Emily, last night a man came to my house. He said Richard owes money. A lot of money. He said if it's not paid in a week, something bad will happen." Her eyes widened slightly, but she quickly masked it. "Mom, you must have misunderstood. Richard is fine. He's handling everything." I shook my head. "No, Emily. This man was serious. He knew your name, your husband's name. He came in the dead of night. That is not normal business. Please, my daughter, open your eyes. Can't you see what's happening?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. For a moment silence stretched between us. Then she whispered, "Richard told me you'd try this. He said you'd make up stories to turn me against him." My heart dropped. "What?" She stood, her voice rising. "He said you were jealous, that you don't want me to be happy. And now you're here spinning lies about men and debts. Mom, why can't you just let me live my life?" I rose too, my voice trembling with desperation. "Because your life is in danger, Emily. I don't care if you hate me. I don't care if you never forgive me. But I will not stand by and watch that man destroy you." Her face hardened. "Stop calling him that man. He's my husband. I love him." Tears stung my eyes. "And do you think he loves you? Do you think a man who whispers lies about your own mother truly loves you? Open your eyes, child." The front door slammed open before I could say more. Richard walked in, his smile vanishing the moment he saw me. His eyes narrowed, his jaw clenched. "What are you doing here?" His voice was cold, sharp. "I came to warn my daughter," I said, standing tall though my knees trembled. "She deserves to know the truth." He stepped closer, his presence heavy, his eyes like steel. "The truth? Or your twisted version of it?" Emily moved quickly, placing herself between us. "Richard, please don't. She's just worried." But Richard's gaze never left me. He leaned in close, his voice low enough for only me to hear. "One more word from you and you'll regret it." A shiver ran down my spine. For the first time, I saw the mask slip completely. Behind his polished charm was something dangerous, something cruel. I swallowed hard. But I refused to back down. "You can threaten me all you want. But one day, Emily will see you for who you really are. And when that day comes, she'll regret every tear she made me shed." His eyes darkened, but before he could reply, Emily grabbed his arm. "Please stop. Both of you." The room fell into tense silence. Finally, I turned toward the door. "I'll go. But remember my words, Emily. 1 week. That's what they said. 1 week." And then I left, my heart heavy, my spirit burning with both sorrow and fear. The days that followed were a blur of worry. Each morning, I woke with dread, wondering if this would be the day the threats became real. I prayed. I fasted. I begged God to open Emily's eyes, to protect her from the storm I felt brewing. But instead of drawing closer, Emily grew more distant. She stopped answering my calls. When I went to her apartment again, the guard told me Richard had ordered that I was not to be allowed in. My own daughter had shut me out. The pain was unbearable. I felt like a stranger in her life, unwanted, unloved. Still, I could not give up. I wrote her letters, slipping them under her door at night. Letters filled with love, with warnings, with memories of our better days. I don't know if she ever read them. And then exactly 7 days after the man had come to my door, it happened. It was late evening. I was preparing a small meal when loud banging shook my door. My heart leapt. I rushed to open it, praying it was Emily. It was not Emily. It was 3 men, rough-looking, their eyes cold. "Time's up," one of them said. My breath caught. "Please. I don't know where Richard is. I don't have any money. Please don't hurt me." They exchanged glances. Then the tallest one stepped forward. "Not you. Your daughter. Where is she?" I don't know." I stammered, fear choking me. His eyes narrowed dangerously. "Then you'd better find her. Because if she doesn't pay, we'll make her pay in ways you won't like." And with that, they turned and disappeared into the night, leaving me trembling in the doorway. But even as my fear consumed me, I realized something worse. If they couldn't find Emily, they might come for me instead. I could barely breathe after the men left. Their words echoed in my ears like drums of war. "If she doesn't pay, we'll make her pay in ways you won't like." I shut the door, bolted it, and leaned against it with trembling hands. My knees buckled, and I sank slowly to the floor. My chest rose and fell with ragged breaths. I had thought I had known fear before, but no, this was a different kind of fear. It was the fear of losing not just money, not just property, but flesh, blood, life itself. That night I did not sleep. I sat by the window again, staring at the street outside, afraid that at any moment they would return. My ears were tuned to every sound, the footsteps of late-night walkers, the honk of distant cars, even the wind rattling through the trees. Every noise made my heart leap. I prayed silently, rocking myself gently like a child. "God, save her. Save my daughter. Don't let them harm her." But even as I prayed for her safety, another thought stabbed my heart. Would she pray the same for me? The next morning, word had already begun to spread. Neighbors whispered when I passed, their eyes filled with both pity and curiosity. Some pretended not to know, but others were bold enough to ask. "I heard some men came to your house last night, Mrs. Collins," the woman from across the street said as she watered her flowers. "Is it true?" I forced a weak smile. "Just a mistake. They were looking for someone else." But even as I spoke, I could see the doubt in her eyes. Rumors travel faster than truth, and I knew before long, everyone would know that my daughter and her husband were in deep trouble. Shame sat heavy on me, not just because of the gossip, but because I had no answers. I had raised Emily to be strong, to be wise, to walk with dignity. And now this. By afternoon, I knew what I had to do. I couldn't wait any longer. I had to face Emily again, no matter how much she hated me, no matter how many doors Richard tried to shut between us. She needed to know that danger was closing in, and she needed to hear it from me, her mother, not from the men who would soon come knocking on her own door. I dressed slowly, tying my faded scarf tightly around my head, and set out for her apartment. Each step felt heavy, but determination pushed me forward. When I arrived, the guard frowned at me. "Madam, I told you before. Mr. Richard said you're not allowed inside." I straightened my back, forcing courage into my voice. Tell him I don't need his permission to see my daughter. I am her mother." The guard hesitated. My voice had carried the weight of years, of a love too stubborn to bow. Finally he sighed and let me through. I knocked on the door, my heart pounding. A few moments later Emily opened it. Her eyes widened in surprise, then narrowed in irritation. "Mom? Why are you here again?" "I need to talk to you," I said, pushing gently past her into the living room. "It's important." She groaned. "Mom, please. Richard isn't here, and I don't have time for another lecture." "This isn't a lecture," I said sharply. "This is life and death." She froze, blinking at me. I told her everything, the men at my door, their threats, the deadline. My voice shook, but my words were clear. I left nothing out. When I finished, silence hung in the room. Emily's face was pale, her hands trembling slightly. For the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. But then she shook her head quickly. No, Mum, it can't be true. Richard said everything was fine. He said we're safe." "Emily." I grabbed her hands, gripping them tightly. "Look at me. Does this look fine? Do I look safe? They came to my house. They could have hurt me. They will come for you next." Her lips trembled. Tears filled her eyes, but she pulled her hands away. "Richard will fix it. He always fixes things." My heart broke all over again. "My daughter, can't you see? He is the problem. He is the one dragging you into the fire. Don't you understand? If you stay with him, he will destroy you." Her tears spilled over. "Stop it, Mum. Stop saying that. I love him. He's the only one who believes in me. You only ever doubted me." Her words cut deep, deeper than any knife. I stumbled back, my chest aching. Was that truly what she believed? That all my sacrifices, all my prayers, all my sleepless nights meant nothing but doubt to her? Before I could respond, the door burst open. Richard stormed in, his face twisted with fury. "What is this?" he demanded, slamming the door behind him. His eyes darted between me and Emily, narrowing on the tears on her face. "What did you say to her?" "I told her the truth," I said firmly, though fear gripped my stomach. "About the men. About the debt. About what will happen if you don't fix this." For a moment, silence. Then Richard laughed, low, cruel, mocking. "You old fool. Always meddling. Always poisoning her mind against me." Emily rushed to his side. "Richard, please." But before she could finish, he shoved her aside roughly. She stumbled, gasping. My eyes widened in shock. "Don't you see?" I cried, pointing at him. "This is the man you chose. A man who pushes you, who lies to you, who puts your life in danger." Richard's eyes blazed. He stepped toward me, his fists clenched. "Say another word, and I swear." I stood tall, meeting his rage with all the strength left in me. "What will you do? Kill me? Go ahead. But know this, Richard, truth cannot be buried forever. One day she will see you for what you are. And when that day comes, she will leave you." For a heartbeat he froze, his jaw tight. Then in a sudden burst, he struck the wall beside me with his fist. The sound thundered through the room, the plaster cracking under the force. Emily screamed. I did not flinch. My body trembled, but I did not step back. Richard glared at me, breathing heavily, his chest rising and falling like a storm barely contained. "Get out," he growled. "Get out before I forget you're her mother." I turned to Emily, tears blurring my vision. "My daughter, please leave with me. Come home. Before it's too late." But Emily stood frozen, her body shaking, her lips parted in shock. She said nothing. With a heavy heart, I turned and walked to the door. As I stepped out, Richard's voice followed me, cold and final. "Next time you won't walk out so easily." That night, back in my small, quiet home, I broke completely. I lay on the floor, sobbing until no tears were left. My chest ached, my head throbbed, but worst of all was the hollowness in my heart. I cried out to God. Why? Why my child? Why must I watch her drown while she calls it swimming? The silence answered me. But just as I began to drift into restless sleep, a sound shattered the night, shouting, screaming, a crash from outside. I rushed to the window, my heart racing, and what I saw froze my blood. It was Emily, standing in the street, crying, and Richard, chasing after her, his hand raised. The night Emily ran into the street is one I will never forget. Her voice was sharp, filled with terror, her tears glistening under the flickering streetlight. Richard's face was twisted with rage as he lunged after her, his hand raised, ready to strike. I don't remember thinking. My legs simply moved. I rushed out of my door, barefoot, my heart pounding so loud I thought it would burst. "Emily!" I screamed, my voice raw. She turned, her eyes wide, her whole body trembling. "Mum." In that split second, before Richard's hand could fall, I stepped between them. His palm struck my shoulder instead, the sting spreading across my skin like fire. I stumbled, but I did not fall. I looked him straight in the eye. "That's enough," I said, my voice steady though my body shook. "You will not touch my daughter again." Emily clung to me, sobbing, while Richard glared at us both. His chest rose and fell like a raging bull, but in his eyes, I saw something else too, fear. Not of me, but of the crumbling world he had built around his lies. Because even as we stood there, headlights flashed down the street. A car screeched to a stop, and out stepped the very men who had come to my door a week before. The debt collectors. Their faces were hard, their voices louder than thunder. "Richard, where's our money?" For the first time, Richard's mask slipped completely. He stammered, he backed away, he tried to bargain. But they were done listening. Emily gasped, clutching me tighter. "Mum, what's happening?" "The truth," I whispered, "is finally catching up to him." The men closed in on Richard, and in the chaos, neighbors began to gather. Whispers filled the air, questions, gasps. Richard had built a life on charm and deceit, but now the curtain was falling in front of everyone. The police came minutes later, summoned by the noise. The collectors shouted, Richard cursed, Emily wept. And I, though my knees were weak, though my body trembled, stood firm. For my daughter. For the truth. The days after Richard's arrest were heavy with silence. Emily refused to eat at first, refused to speak, only lay in her bed staring at the ceiling. Her world had shattered, and though I was by her side, she barely seemed to notice me. I cooked for her, prayed for her, sat by her bed through the long nights. Sometimes I hummed old lullabies she used to love as a child, hoping they would reach the little girl hidden under all her pain. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the room glowed with orange light, she finally spoke. "Mum." Her voice cracked, small like a child's. "You were right." Tears stung my eyes. I took her hand gently. "I wasn't right because I wanted to be. I was right because I couldn't bear to see you hurt." Her tears spilled over. "I said terrible things to you. I shut you out. I called you names. I even denied you at the bank that day. I told them you were just my grandma, not my mother." Her words stabbed deep, reopening wounds I thought had begun to heal. But I forced myself to smile softly. "And still, I never stopped being your mother. That is something no words can erase." She broke then, sobbing into my lap, holding on to me as if she feared I would disappear. I stroked her hair gently, rocking her the way I had when she was small. "I'm sorry, Mum," she whispered over and over. And each time, I answered with the only truth I had left. "I forgive you." Weeks later, the court sentenced Richard for fraud, assault, and unpaid debts. He was taken away in handcuffs, shouting empty threats, his charm long gone. The same people who once praised him now whispered about his downfall. Emily watched silently, her hand gripping mine so tightly that my fingers ached. When it was over, she turned to me and whispered, "I'm free." And I smiled, though tears blurred my vision. "Yes, my child. You are free." But freedom came with scars. The shame of her choices, the guilt of her denial, weighed heavily on Emily. There were days she could not look me in the eye. Days when she avoided mirrors. Days when she sat in silence, fighting battles no one else could see. And on those days I reminded her gently, "Falling is not the end, my daughter. Rising again is where the story changes." Months passed and slowly life found rhythm again. Emily found work, humble but honest. She smiled more, laughed sometimes, and even joined me in church again. People still whispered, but whispers could not crush us anymore. One bright morning we returned to the bank together. I had to settle some papers, and Emily insisted on coming along. As we entered, the memory of that awful day returned, the day she had denied me, the day she had said, "She's just my grandma." My heart clenched. But this time when the teller asked who I was, Emily lifted her chin, her voice clear and strong. She is my mother. The words echoed in the bank's quiet air. Simple words but heavy with redemption. I felt my throat tighten, tears pricking my eyes. For so long I had waited to hear her claim me again. And now she did. Not out of duty, not out of fear, but out of love. That night, as we sat together in the small warmth of my kitchen, Emily looked at me and said, "Mom, I've learned something." I smiled. "What is it, child?" She took a deep breath. "Love should never blind us. And pride should never silence us. I was blinded by what I thought was love, and I was too proud to listen to you. But I see now that the people who truly love us are the ones who stand by us, even when we hurt them." I nodded, my heart swelling with both sorrow and joy. "Yes, Emily. Love tells the truth, even when it hurts. And family may stumble, but it never walks away." She leaned against me, resting her head on my shoulder. And for the first time in what felt like years, peace filled my heart. "So this is the story, my child. The story of how I was denied, betrayed, and broken. But also the story of how love endured, how truth prevailed, and how a daughter found her way back to her mother's arms. The day at the bank, when she said, 'She's just my grandma,' will always remain etched in my memory as the deepest cut. But today, when she stood in that same bank and called me my mother, that too will stay with me forever. Because in the end, love did not fail. And that is the lesson I leave with you. No matter how far a child may wander, a mother's love can light the way home."